The name Epstein still has the power to stop a conversation. It conjures images of a private island, a suicide in a high-security prison, and a client list of the most powerful people on Earth. For years, the story has been simple, a story of sex, power, and perversion. But now, key figures in Washington, like Representatives Massie and Green, are challenging that narrative. They're demanding the full files from the Department of Justice. And they're suggesting the entire investigation is a smokescreen. A smokescreen to hide what? The media obsesses over the names on the flight logs. They want to know which politician, which celebrity, which billionaire was involved. They are asking the wrong question. What if the sordid details are just the cost of admission? What if the blackmail wasn't the goal, but the enforcement mechanism for a hidden system of finance? A parallel economy estimated at over $20 trillion that connects Wall Street, global intelligence agencies, and the world's elite. What if I told you we've seen this playbook before? A sensational public scandal that provides the perfect cover for a systemic financial coup. To understand what's really being hidden, we can't look at Epstein. We have to look at Watergate. To understand the con, you must first understand the magic trick. Let's travel back to June 17, 1972. 5 men, dressed in suits, are arrested in the dead of night with wiretapping equipment inside the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex. The press barely registers it. The White House dismisses it as a third-rate burglary attempt. And why wouldn't they? President Richard Nixon was a colossus. He was at the absolute height of his power, cruising toward a historic 49-state landslide victory. This small, bizarre, and seemingly incompetent crime was a footnote, a joke, a mosquito on the hide of an elephant. But then 2 reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, found a thread, and they began to pull. And for the next 2 years, the entire planet became transfixed. It wasn't just a news story, it became the only story. The world was consumed by the cover-up, the tapes, the hearings, the slow, agonizing, public collapse of an administration, all culminating in the resignation of a president. Watergate. It became the definition of a political scandal. It's the story they teach in every history class. It's the story we all know. But it's not the real story. It's the smokescreen. To find the real story, you have to rewind the clock, not to the 1972 break-in, but to almost a full year before it, August 15, 1971, a date that has been surgically removed from our collective memory, yet it is the day the modern world was truly born. While the Watergate plumbers were still just a paranoid whisper in the halls of the White House, President Nixon went on live television and made an announcement that ended the world as we knew it. Since 1944, the entire global financial order, the Bretton Woods system, was built on one single unbreakable promise. The US dollar was as good as gold. Any nation at any time could exchange its dollar, reserves for physical gold from America's vaults. This was the anchor. It was what gave the system stability. In a few short minutes, Nixon announced he was closing the gold window. He severed the dollar's final link to gold. He unilaterally, and with no warning, told the entire world that America's promise was now void. It was the single greatest financial coup in human history. In the shadow of a future political scandal, the very nature of money was rewritten. The anchor was cut. For the first time in history, the dollar, and by extension every currency on Earth, was backed by nothing. Nothing but the faith in the government that printed it and the military that enforced it. The era of sound money was over. The new era of fiat debt had begun. And the world? The world was too distracted by the smokescreen to even notice. The Watergate hearings, in all their televised drama, provided the perfect cover. While the entire press corps was hunting for a smoking gun tape in the Oval Office, the real architects of power were busy building a brand new system. A system of limitless money printing, limitless government debt, and ultimately, limitless control. This is the elite diversion playbook. It is a masterpiece of misdirection, and it unfolds in 3 distinct stages. First, the public scandal, a sensational, media-friendly story of crime and corruption that consumes all the oxygen in the room. Second, the hidden maneuver, a complex, systemic, and deliberately boring financial shift executed in the background while no one is looking. And third, the consolidation, the permanent capture of wealth and power by the elite who now operate under a new set of invisible rules that they themselves just wrote. As we go through these stages, you will see the terrifying parallels to our world today, and you will understand what the Epstein smokescreen is really. Back in the 1970s, the public scandal was Watergate, and it was a masterpiece of political theater. It was at its heart a simple, compelling whodunit, who ordered the break-in, what did the president know, and when did he know it? The questions were easy to understand, and the cast of characters was like something from a Hollywood thriller. We had the dogged, truth-seeking reporters, the shadowy plumbers, the turncoat insider John Dean, and the tragic, paranoid king at the center of it all, Richard Nixon. For 2 solid years, the entire American public was glued to their television sets, watching the drama of the hearings unfold. It was a national obsession. It consumed every newspaper headline, every nightly news broadcast. And this is precisely what made it the perfect diversion. The narrative was perfectly self-contained. It was a story about one man's corruption, one administration's cancer on the presidency. It was presented as a morality play, Republicans versus Democrats, the system versus the individual. This framing was the masterstroke. It focused all the righteous, seething anger of the American public onto a single, satisfying target. When Nixon finally resigned, the public felt a sense of catharsis. We felt like we had won. The system had worked. The truth had come out. Justice had been served. We had slayed the dragon. And in our celebration, we never thought to look in the dragon's cave. We never thought to ask why the dragon was there in the first place, or if, perhaps, it was just guarding something far, far larger. The scandal gave us a villain to hate, and in our hatred, we were blinded. Does that sound familiar? Fast forward to today, and we see the exact same thing, but amplified by the steroids of the modern internet. The Epstein story, as presented by the media, is not just political theater, it is salacious theater. It's a no. They're whodunit, but this time the stakes are even more primal. It's not about politics, it's about sex. It's about the grotesque depravity of the global elite. The media obsesses and encourages us to obsess over the list. Who is on it? Which celebrity is implicated? Which tech billionaire? Which former president? Which politician will be the next to fall? The narrative is, once again, perfectly contained. Social media is flooded with redacted PDFs, flight logs, and grainy photographs from a tropical island. It's a scavenger hunt for sin. This isn't just a diversion, it is an emotional vortex. It's designed to be emotionally consuming. It triggers our most primal, deeply rooted sense of disgust, outrage, and fury. And it performs the exact same function as Watergate. It focuses all of our collective anger onto a list of names. It makes us believe that if we can just expose these people, if we can just name and shame these billionaires and these politicians, we will have rooted out the evil. We will have won. The media wants us to ask, who was on the island? What did they do? Where are the tapes? They never ever want us to ask the real questions. How was this allowed to happen for decades? How was this man, a convicted felon, still able to move in the highest circles of power? And most importantly, why? Why was this network of perversion and criminality not just tolerated by the global elite, but patronized by them? They are happy to have us hunt for the names on the list, because they know it will stop us from hunting for the numbers on the ledger. It is a story about personal depravity, deliberately and carefully packaged to hide a story of systemic corruption. They are focusing all of our anger on a handful of powerful individuals to protect the system that truly empowers them all. And while we are all distracted by this bonfire of perversity, the hidden maneuver is happening right under our noses. To understand the maneuver, we must go back to our historical precedent. While America watched Nixon resign, while we celebrated our victory over the corrupt president, the real event, the 1971 Nixon Shock, was quietly, methodically taking root. This wasn't just a policy change, it was a revolution. It was the moment the very nature of money was rewritten. Before 1971, the system was anchored. The dollar was backed by gold. This meant money was finite. A government, for the most part, could only spend what it had. It was constrained by reality. But when Nixon closed the gold window, he cut the anchor. He untethered the government from all constraints. He and the banking elite who advised him effectively legalized limitless money printing. This created the Fiat system, money backed by nothing but government decree. And to force the rest of the world to accept this new, anchorless paper, they engineered the petrodollar system, striking a deal with OPEC that meant if any nation on earth wanted to buy oil, they first had to buy US dollars. It was a masterstroke of financial blackmail. This single hidden maneuver, executed in the shadow of the Watergate smokescreen, gave birth to everything we see today. The explosive financialization of the economy, the rise of the derivative casino, the era of permanent trillion-dollar deficits, and the endless undeclared wars. Power was quietly and permanently transferred away from the elected representatives of the people and into the hands of a new, unelected aristocracy, the central bankers and the Wall Street institutions they serve. They didn't just rob the bank, they bought the bank and rewrote the rules so the vault would never run empty. And today, the hidden maneuver is infinitely larger and infinitely more terrifying. The media wants you to believe Epstein's power came from his mysterious wealth. That's the lie. Epstein wasn't a financial genius. He was a node. He was a critical junction box, a high-level router in a hidden system. This is the $20 trillion elite secret. To understand this, you have to accept that the real economy you see, the one with stock tickers and 401ks, is only one of the economies. Running parallel to it, there is another, a shadow economy. And this $20 trillion system is composed of two distinct parts. First, there is the missing money. This is the official, government-level black budget. For years, former officials like Catherine Austin Fitts, the former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and economists like Mark Skidmore have been pointing to a staggering mathematical black hole. They dug into official government reports from the Office of the Inspector General, and found that between just 1998 and 2015, the Department of Defense and the Department of Housing and Urban Development could not account for $21 trillion in unsupported adjustments. Let's be very clear about what that means. That is not a simple accounting error. It is not waste. It is a bureaucratic term for a separate set of books. It is a financial backdoor in the U.S. government so large that it constitutes its own separate hidden economy. It is a system of siphoning trillions of dollars completely outside of the law, completely outside of the Constitution, with zero congressional oversight. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is a mathematical fact buried in their own reports. Second, there is the hidden money. This is the private sector equivalent. This is the club's private bank. Institutions like the IMF and the Tax Justice Network have estimated that at least $10 to $13 trillion in private elite wealth is hidden in a vast, global, and perfectly legal network of anonymous shell companies, offshore trusts, and tax havens. From the Cayman Islands and Switzerland to, yes, Delaware and South Dakota. This is the system that allows the true elite to operate as a stateless, transnational class, completely opted out of the very tax system, the very laws, and the very society that they impose on the rest of us. So, we have a $21 trillion government black budget over here, and a $13 trillion private offshore world over here. Two parallel economies, one public and one private, both completely in the dark. And this is where Epstein was the master. He was the link. He was the bridge. His real job wasn't just sex trafficking. That was a monstrous but necessary tool of his trade. His real value to the club was twofold. First, he was the financial liaison. He was the concierge to this shadow economy. He wasn't just a money manager. He was an integrator. He was the man who showed the nouveau riche, the tech billionaires, the hedge fund titans, how to get their new money, their gauche, taxable, visible money, and turn it into old money, how to move it into the dark, hidden, untouchable offshore system. He was the accountant for the untouchables. We know this. The unsealed records from the lawsuits against J.P. Morgan are the smoking gun. The bank admitted in court documents that it flagged over $1 billion in suspicious cash-based transactions from his accounts. $1 billion. They knew he was moving massive illicit sums. But they didn't shut him down. Why? Because Epstein wasn't just a client. He was a partner. He was the perfect cutout. The man who could move between the legitimate world of Wall Street banking and the shadow world of black budgets and offshore cash. And no one would ever ask a question. Second, and this is the most critical part, Epstein provided the blackmail as collateral. Think about it. Logically, in this hidden multi-trillion-dollar shadow economy, how do you run it? There are no courts, there is no legal system, there are no contracts. If a billionaire gives a politician a $100 million bribe, if a banker agrees to launder $1 trillion for a black ops agency, what's the enforcement? What stops one from ratting on the other? What stops them from breaking the deal? You need leverage. You need mutually assured destruction. You need collateral, the island, the tapes, the jet, the network of underage victims. That wasn't a hobby. That wasn't the business. That was the enforcement mechanism. That was the brutal, disgusting, satanic insurance policy that kept every member of the club in line. It was the price of admission. By participating in the depravity, you were now owned. The politician, the central banker, the tech CEO, the academic, they were all bonded together, chained by a secret so dark it could never be allowed to see the light of day. This is the secret. They aren't protecting a list of pedophiles. That's secondary. They are protecting the ledger. They are protecting the collateral system, the very enforcement mechanism of a $20 trillion shadow government. And now, that entire system is at risk, which leads to the final, terrifying stage, the consolidation. The result of the Nixon Shock, the maneuver hidden by the Watergate smokescreen, was the great stagflation of the 1970s. For the average American, the public who thought they had won by ousting Nixon, the next 10 years were a living nightmare. It was a lost decade. Their paychecks were vaporized in real time by double-digit inflation. Their savings were rendered worthless. Unemployment soared. The American dream collapsed. But was it a lost decade for everyone? Not for the new class of central bankers and Wall Street financiers. For them, it was a golden age. They were now in complete control of the infinite money spigot. They had created the crisis, the inflation, by printing money with no restraint. And then they rode in as the saviors, offering the cure. That cure was Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker, who jacked up interest rates to over 20%, choking off the economy, crushing the middle class, and bankrupting a generation of farmers and small businesses. And in that manufactured depression, the same Wall Street banks that had caused the problem were able to scoop up trillions in real assets, land, businesses, infrastructure, for pennies on the dollar. They consolidated their power. And today, the Fiat system that was born in 1971 is now a 50-year-old patient dying of a terminal disease called debt. It is mathematically over. The mountain of debt is so large it can never be repaid. It can only default. It will collapse. This is not a guess. It is a mathematical certainty, and the elite know it. This is why the Epstein smokescreen is so critical right now, because we are at another 1971 moment. The collapse isn't an accident they are trying to prevent. The collapse is a controlled demolition they are managing. They are preparing to transition us into a new system. You've heard the name, they talk about it openly at the World Economic Forum, at the IMF, and at the Federal Reserve. They call it Central Bank Digital Currencies, CBDCs. They will sell this to you as progress, as convenience, as safer, faster, digital money. It is a lie. A CBDC is not like Venmo or Zelle or even Bitcoin. Those are layers on top of the old system. A CBDC is the replacement of the system itself. It is not digital money. It is programmable money. It is authoritarian money. It is a system of total control. It is a system where your money is no longer yours. It is a liability of the central bank, which allows you to use it for now. It is a system where every single transaction you ever make, every coffee you buy, every website you visit, every donation you make, is tracked, recorded, and stored in a central government ledger. It is a system where your money can be expired if you don't spend it fast enough to stimulate the economy. It is a system where your money can be frozen if you attend a protest, or fined if you buy too much gasoline, or blocked from buying plane tickets if you question the official narrative online. It is the end of privacy. It is the end of dissent. It is the end of human freedom. It is a digital panopticon. But you can't just ask a free population to accept this. They would and they will reject it. So what do? You need a crisis. You need a crisis so profound, so catastrophic, so terrifying, that the public will beg for the solution. You need the everything crash they keep warning us about. You need a hyperinflationary spiral that vaporizes the dollar. You need a banking crisis that wipes out people's savings. You need chaos in the streets. And then, right at the moment of maximum pain, the arsonists who started the fire will ride in as the fire department. The Federal Reserve will emerge as the savior, offering to rescue the public by rolling out their new, stable, secure digital dollar. All you have to do is trade in your last remaining scraps of freedom for a little bit of safety, and that is why they cannot allow the real Epstein files to be released. Not because it exposes a few powerful men, but because it exposes the entire playbook. It exposes the $20 trillion shadow ledger. It proves that the club, the elite, the system, has been operating as a criminal enterprise outside the rules for decades. If the public knew the full extent of this financial criminality, if they knew the coming crash was not an accident, but a planned demolition, they would never, ever accept the solution from the very people who engineered the collapse. The Epstein smokescreen is the final, desperate act of a dying empire. They are not just protecting their wealth, they are managing their ascent into a new, permanent system of total technological control. The pattern is now complete. The blueprint is laid bare for all to see, just as the Watergate scandal was manufactured to be the smokescreen that hid the birth of the Fiat debt supercycle. The Epstein scandal is now being meticulously managed as the smokescreen to hide its death. The two events are perfect bookends to the same 50-year-long financial crime. But the consequences this time will be exponentially greater. The 1970s stagflation, the soft collapse that followed the Nixon Shock, was a controlled burn. It was painful. It stole a decade of prosperity from the middle class, but the system itself survived. This time, the bubble is not just in one or two sectors. The bubble is in everything. The debt, both public and private, has grown from billions to hundreds of trillions. The very Fiat system, born in 1971, is now a hollowed-out corpse, walking only because the central banks are pumping it full of digital adrenaline. The coming collapse will not be a lost decade, it will be a tsunami. It will be the mathematical vaporization of the global economy as we know it. This is the final terrifying parallel. The Watergate smokescreen allowed the elite to consolidate their power by managing a transition away from sound, gold-backed money, and into their new system of infinite debt-backed money. They traded an anchor for a printing press. Today, the Epstein smokescreen is designed to allow them to consolidate power one last final time. They are managing the transition away from their failing debt-backed money and into their new digital endgame, a system of surveillance-backed money, from a printing press to a panopticon, from the dollar to the CBDC. They are preparing to trade the very concept of your money for their control. And this leads us to the final, explicit prediction. This is why the full, unredacted, real Epstein files will never be released. Not the ones that matter, not the ones that contain the financial ledgers, not the ones that detail the blackmail collateral that holds the shadow economy together. The current investigation, as Representative Thomas Massie correctly identifies, is the smokescreen. Its entire purpose is to perform a limited hangout. It is to strategically release just enough salacious information, just enough celebrity names, just enough sordid details to satisfy the public's demand for blood. Its purpose is to contain the narrative, to keep the entire story locked in the realm of sex, perversion, and personal sin, precisely to stop the public from ever discovering the financial one. They are sacrificing a few pawns to protect their king. But the king isn't a person. The king is the system. They are distracting us with a bonfire of perversion to hide the greatest theft in human history. This theft is the final quiet transfer of their $20 trillion shadow economy, the black budgets, the offshore wealth, into a new, digital, inescapable fortress. A fortress where their wealth is safe and your money is a privilege they grant you. They are doing this right now, in the background, while we are all looking the other way, right before they pull the plug on the old system for good. The everything crash isn't a possibility they are afraid of. It is the plan. It is the crisis they need to make us beg for their solution. The Epstein network was never just a trafficking ring. It was the insurance policy. It was the brutal, dark mechanism that guaranteed every key politician, every central banker, and every billionaire would follow the script and be safely on board the new ark when they finally decided to start the flood. The Epstein case was never about one man. It was a window, a brief, terrifying glimpse into the real system of power, a $20 trillion shadow economy run on blackmail and influence, completely parallel to our own. An island, a private jet, and a list of names were never the story. They were just tools of the trade. They are using the scandal of sex to hide the crime of finance. They are frantically pushing the story of personal perversion to protect the ledger of systemic corruption. They are not protecting the people on the list. They are protecting the system that the list controls. History provides the map. The pattern is clear. The question is no longer, who is on the list? The real question is, what are they building while we're all looking the other way? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you find this content valuable, make sure to subscribe and click the bell. Our next investigation will follow the money